Soft instrumental background, slow strings with faint piano notes, reflective tone. Strength isn't measured by how loud you speak, it's measured by how deeply you listen, especially to yourself. Agnes Callard reminds us that philosophy is not about detachment from emotion. It's about understanding emotion, because true wisdom doesn't suppress feeling, it shapes it, and one of the greatest forms of emotional intelligence is the ability to decide when and to whom you reveal your inner world. When someone asks a question that feels sharp, that pierces like judgment, your instincts might push you to react. But pause. Not every battle deserves a warrior. Not every accusation deserves an answer. Sometimes, silence is not withdrawal, it's composure. You're not avoiding confrontation, you're mastering it. You're reminding yourself that maturity isn't reacting to everything that provokes you. It's choosing which energy deserves your attention. Agnes Callard often says that human beings are in constant conversation with their better selves. That's what aspiration truly is, the dialogue between who we are and who we wish to become. But that dialogue must stay sacred. It's not meant for every audience. When you open your heart to the wrong listener, your truth gets distorted by their insecurity. When you give explanations to those who aren't ready to understand, your wisdom becomes their weapon. So protect your dialogue, guard your evolution, let your growth speak for itself. Quietly, patiently, powerfully, music begins to swell slightly, gentle but determined. The world will always try to test your calm. It will always demand that you justify your path. But your peace isn't a debate. It's a decision, and when you finally realize that, you stop performing and start existing, because there's nothing stronger than a soul that no longer seeks to be seen, only to be aligned. Pause for 3 seconds, music fades, then shifts to a rising tempo. Part 7, The Awakening of Self-Mastery. Music deepens, cinematic build with a slow emotional rise. There comes a moment when the world's noise fades, and only your heartbeat remains. That's the moment of awakening, the moment you realize that the power you were chasing, validation, respect, understanding was never out there. It was always within. Agnes Callard calls this process aspiration toward the good. It's not about perfection, and it's about direction. You're not supposed to have it all figured out. You're supposed to have the courage to keep walking toward clarity. When you stop answering every question, when you stop explaining your worth, you reclaim your energy, and that energy becomes your compass. It guides you toward purpose, not approval. Think of every question you've ever been asked, the ones that made you doubt yourself, that made you feel small, that made you hesitate before speaking. Now imagine yourself standing before them again, calm, steady, and free. You no longer need to prove anything, because the person you've become speaks louder than any answer ever could. That's the essence of self-mastery, not dominance, not ego, but control, the quiet kind, the kind that moves mountains without making noise. Music rises, more emotional, strings and percussion build. You become unshakable not by resisting the world, but by understanding it. You stop reacting and start reflecting. You stop defending and start defining, and one day, you look back and realize, every time you stayed silent when chaos tried to pull you in, you were building peace. Every time you didn't answer the question meant to trap you, you were teaching your spirit patience. You were not losing ground. You were finding depth, long pause, single piano note. And that right there is where wisdom begins. Ending at the last word, music fades into a soft cinematic piano melody, emotional, final tone. If you say something that comes from truth, and someone asks a question meant to twist it, never answer it. Not because you're afraid, but because you've learned that silence can speak more clearly than words ever. Agnes Callard teaches that philosophy is not about escaping life. It's about living it consciously, and consciousness means knowing when to speak and when to simply be. So, to everyone watching this, remember, you are not obligated to explain your piece. You are not required to justify your dreams. You are not here to answer questions that only exist to weaken your spirit. The next time someone challenges your calm, remember, Their curiosity is not your command. Your silence is not submission when it's strength. Your stillness is not emptiness, it's wisdom, and your refusal to respond is not avoidance, it's evolution. Music swells. Cinematic finale. Build. Because when you learn to walk in truth without defending it, when you learn to be seen without seeking approval, when you learn to let your silence speak for you, that's when you become untouchable. That's when you embody peace. That's when philosophy meets power. Long pause. Soft piano outro. Fade to black. Soft ambient sound builds. A low meditative hum mixed with piano chords. Every person who questions you holds a mirror. But not every mirror shows the truth. Sometimes, it reflects not who you are, but what they fear to see in themselves. Agnes Callard says that much of human misunderstanding comes not from what we say, but from what others need us to represent. When someone asks, "Why can't you change?" what they often mean is, "Why can't you change in the way that makes me comfortable?" That's not curiosity. That's projection. You see, the hardest truth to accept is this. Most people don't want to understand you. They want to fit you into their idea, their belief, their comfort zone. But you weren't made to be anyone's reflection. You were made to be your own revelation. And if that makes others uncomfortable, let them be uncomfortable. Because growth isn't polite. Self-respect isn't always soft. And truth, when spoken with clarity, doesn't need to apologize for its echo. When someone tests you with manipulation disguised as concern, with a smile that hides a demand, remember what Agnes Callard teaches. Philosophy isn't about winning arguments. It's about refusing to live unexamined lives. So examine this moment. Are you explaining your actions because they genuinely deserve understanding? Or are you defending your existence because someone can't handle your independence? Every time you bend yourself to be accepted, you lose the shape of your soul. And one day, you'll wake up realizing you've become fluent in someone else's language while forgetting your own. Never trade authenticity for attention. Never answer a question that seeks to rewrite your story. And never let someone's insecurity dictate the volume of your truth. Music softens into stillness because silence in the presence of manipulation is not avoidance when it's mastery. Part 4. The courage to remain misunderstood. Music re-enters with strings and slow heartbeat rhythm, intense and intimate tone. One of the greatest fears we carry is being misunderstood. We crave to be seen, to be known, to be validated. But Agnes Callard reminds us, the path to wisdom is often lonely, because growth always separates you from the comfort of agreement. If you say something that comes from deep conviction, not everyone will understand you, and that's okay. Because clarity of thought doesn't guarantee company. It guarantees resistance. When you stop answering every question meant to challenge your worth, something changes inside you. The silence that once felt like rejection becomes a sanctuary. You stop chasing approval and start practicing authenticity. The world will tell you, explain yourself, or you're arrogant. But the wise understand, self-explanation isn't humility, it's surrender, especially when the audience is unwilling to listen. Agnes Callard once wrote that our conversations are not about who's right, but about who's still becoming. That's why silence, when chosen consciously, is not ignorance. It's evolution. You are no longer arguing for others to see your light. You're busy learning how to make it shine brighter. So if someone looks at you with disbelief, mocks your choices, or asks questions meant to corner you, smile. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to be understood, to be misunderstood and at peace, and that is true power. Because peace without explanation is freedom in its purest form. Swells, hopeful yet steady. Remember this. Being misunderstood by the crowd doesn't mean you're wrong. It often means you're ahead. It means your frequency has changed. And those who still speak in the language of insecurity can't yet hear you. Walk away. Not in anger, but in awareness. Because sometimes, walking away is the highest form of education. Part 5. The philosophy of strength. Cinematic tone builds. Deep bass. With slow rise of orchestral intensity. There's a kind of strength the world doesn't recognize. The strength of restraint. The way strength to stay quiet when provoked, the strength to not defend when accused, the strength to hold your peace when everyone demands your reaction. Agnes Callard teaches that aspiration, the desire to become better, is not about perfection, but persistence. It's about learning how to remain grounded in the storm of other people's opinions. When a woman, or anyone, tests your composure with piercing questions, don't meet fire with fire. Meet it with depth. Respond not with defense but with direction. Say less, mean more, because there's power in the man or woman who can listen. Reflect and still choose silence when noise won't lead to truth. Your silence is not weakness, it's strategy, it's control, it's the boundary between reaction and response, between chaos and character. Music shifts to gentle piano, then steady rhythm. In philosophy, Callard speaks of becoming who we aspire to be. And sometimes, the greatest step in that journey is learning to not answer, not because you don't know, but because you finally understand what's worth your words. If you always rush to explain, you stay chained to misunderstanding. If you always try to be liked, you stay a prisoner to perception. But when you begin to trust your stillness, your world begins to change, because silence has a frequency, and those who truly care will tune into it. The rest will drift away, and that's how you'll know you're finally aligned with truth. So remember, when the wrong question comes, when someone demands your energy, your time, your validation, look within and smile gently. Because the one who knows themselves never fears the judgment of others. Soft piano music fades in, voice calm but intense. They say words have power, but few understand that a single question, the wrong one asked at the wrong time, can shake the foundation of who you are. Today, we ask, if you say this, should you ever answer that question? Agnes Callard once said that philosophy begins not when you have answers, but when you realize how little you truly know. And that's where this journey begins, not with confidence, but with awareness. In every relationship, every conversation, there comes a moment when someone, often with a gentle tone, asks a question that cuts through your armor. A question like, do you even care? Who do you think you are? Or why can't you just be different? And it's in that moment that your response defines not just your relationship with that person, but your relationship with yourself. Agnes Callard reminds us that most people think philosophy is about truth, but truth is nothing if you don't have the courage to live it. And courage begins when you stop answering every question the world throws at you and start asking your own. Music rises slightly, pacing builds. This video isn't about silence. It's about strength. It's about understanding that you owe the world honesty, but not submission. You owe others kindness, but not self-betrayal. And you owe yourself something greater than approval. You owe yourself clarity. So if you ever find yourself trapped in a conversation where you feel you're being tested, remember this. You don't have to win the argument. You don't have to explain your worth, and you don't have to answer a question that was never meant to understand you, only to control you. Let's begin. Part 1. The hidden test. Low hum of background music, slightly darker tone. Every person who walks into your life brings questions with them, but not every question deserves an answer. When a woman, or anyone, asks you, why are you like this? And they may not be asking out of curiosity. Sometimes it's not a search for truth. It's a search for control. Philosopher Agnes Callard teaches that human relationships are not about understanding who the other person already is, but about helping them become who they're trying to be. But too often, people mistake this for permission to reshape others in their own image. That's where the danger lies. When you start explaining yourself to those who've already decided what you should be, you enter a psychological trap, one where every word you say becomes evidence against you. So, when you hear that question, why are you like this? Understand? It's not always an invitation to be understood. Sometimes, it's a test to see if you'll surrender your sense of self. Never hand over your identity in the name of peace. Never explain your purpose to someone who's invested in misunderstanding it. Because once you do, you start living in their story and not yours. Agnes Callard says, Aspiration is the process by which we try to become someone new. But if you spend your energy explaining who you already are, you'll never have the strength to grow into who you could be. Music softens, becomes reflective. So the next time someone questions your values, your dreams, or your decisions, pause before you speak. Ask yourself, are they trying to understand or are they trying to rewrite? Silence sometimes is the loudest form of truth. Part 2. The power of inner dialogue. Music fades to calm strings, tone thoughtful and introspective. The philosopher's greatest tool isn't argument, it's dialogue, but not with others, with themselves. Agnes Callard speaks of aspirational conversation, a dialogue that helps you become wiser than you were yesterday. But that kind of dialogue doesn't happen when you're always reacting to others. It happens when you start listening to your own voice. You see, the world trains you to answer everything. Teachers ask, parents demand, society expects, and somewhere along the way, you forget that not every question deserves your truth. There's freedom in restraint, power in not explaining, and dignity in knowing that silence doesn't mean weakness, it means focus. When someone challenges you, when they say, "Why can't you be more like them?" That's not curiosity, that's comparison. And comparison is the thief of inner peace. Agnes Callard would say that philosophy doesn't solve problems, it sharpens perception. It teaches you to see which questions are worth answering, and which ones are distractions dressed as dialogue. So when a woman, or anyone, asks a question that strikes your ego, don't rush to defend yourself. Pause. Breathe. And ask yourself a deeper question. Do I need to be understood, or do I need to be grounded? Because if you seek understanding from those who haven't done the inner work, you'll always end up explaining yourself to people who aren't really listening. Remember, confidence isn't the volume of your answers. It's the depth of your silence. Maturity isn't how well you argue. It's how calmly you walk away. And wisdom isn't knowing everything. It's knowing what doesn't deserve your energy. Music builds gently. Hopeful tone returns. If you say something from your heart and someone twists it into something ugly, let it be. Your worth is not up for debate. Your truth doesn't require validation. And your peace isn't a gift to be given away. This is the moment where strength meets serenity, when you stop answering every question, because you finally learned which ones matter.